Okay, ladies and gentlemen, well, thanks for coming along to Yes Benarty's third evening of speakers.
Carolyn Leckie was born in Glasgow and now lives in East Kilbride. She is presently working in the voluntary sector supporting women, children and young people who have experienced domestic abuse. Speaking tonight on behalf of Women for Independence. Ladies and gentlemen, Carolyn Leckie.
Just so I can see my notes, although I very rarely stick to my notes. I don't have to wait for my book. I'm going to start a wee bit of audience participation, and I'm sure some smart aleck will really answer to this in the audience. I'm going to quote you somebody who said, because this is dealing with the economic arguments, I'm going to get them out of the road first and foremost. Supporters of independence will always cite examples of small, thriving economies. And it would be wrong to suggest that Scotland couldn't be another successful, independent country. Who do you think said that? Yes, got it in one. God, these are smart. We've had a few meetings already, I take it. I've done quite a lot of these meetings along with Alan and Dennis, and the spotlight is very much on the Yes campaign, the independence campaign, to justify support for independence, and it comes under an awful lot of scrutiny to answer questions that are a lot of the time, quite frankly, impossible. And some of those questions are impossible to answer because, to be absolutely straight about it, the Westminster government could but doesn't sit down and negotiate. Is that better? Some of the detail about any potential transfer of powers should Scotland vote for an independent country. Very rarely. Is that better? Can you hear me? I don't feel as if I can hear me, but that's probably a good thing. So the onus has very much been on the Yes campaign, and I think that's a bit unfair because I think the UK gets off the hook. I think if you pose the same questions to the Westminster government in terms of what will our pensions be like in 10 years' time, what will wages be like, will there be public services, will there be another crash, will this happen, will that happen, will the oil run out, it will run out, whether there's independence or not, but it'll be 50 years before it runs out. And the difference between it running out in a UK context and a Scottish context is that Scotland will control it and control those resources and be able to use it to the benefit of the Scottish people. The UK doesn't come under an awful lot of scrutiny. But I'm going to try and deal with the arguments I have heard from the No campaign, because I think I've heard a lot of very eloquent, progressive, well-informed, frank, honest, factual, as best as they can be, contributions in favour of independence from Yes campaigners. But when the No campaign came out of their shell behind the PR machine and better together to actually debate openly in public, which isn't very often, because, and I have experience of this, organising it from an organisation's point of view of trying to get debates, very, very reluctant to have public debates in front of a public audience. And the ones that I've seen demonstrate why that is the case, because when arguments are tested in front of an audience like yourselves, whether people don't know or know even, you start to see people shifting uncomfortably in the seats because there's very little substance behind the arguments to remain within the UK. But I'm going to deal with the arguments I have heard because they can be summarised into three categories, I would say. The first one, which is the most ridiculous one, is don't like Alex Salmond, the SNP. I don't like his big bald face. I don't want to vote for a one-party state. I don't like the SNP haven't done this as well as they could. They haven't done that as well as they could. And I have to say, so, you don't like Alex Salmond. I'm no SNP, by the way. And you don't like the SNP. Can you tell me which one of the Westminster leaders you like? David Cameron? Nick Clegg? Ed Miliband? Maybe? Potential leaders in the UK Parliament? Nigel Farage? Boris Johnson? Any takers? So, the idea that no liking Alex Salmond is a rational argument against independence is kind of blown out of the water when you look at what's on offer on the benches of Westminster. Don't like the SNP government. A lot of people have said they don't like the SNP government because it's not left-wing enough, it's not progressive enough, and there's no doubt this is a progressive movement. And the values and principles in Scotland are not perfect, they're not very left-wing. I wouldn't be complacent. It's not that there's no racism or anti-immigration or anything in Scotland, but generally in public attitude surveys it's more progressive and it's more towards the left. And a lot of criticism I've heard, see, they wear different hats depending on the audience. When you get Labour people defending the union, they suddenly adopt socialist principles again because the SNP is not left-wing enough. And I say, so, the SNP is not left-wing enough, the White Paper is not left-wing enough, it's not progressive enough. Have you had a look at the UK Constitution? Could you find it anywhere? Do you know what it says? You have the opportunity with independence to write a constitution from scratch with public participation. Even the SNP are offering equality within that constitution. Even the SNP are proposing automatic citizenship on residency. Far to the left of anything on offer from any mainstream Westminster party. Some of the things that you might be concerned about in terms of policy, whether it's payday loans, Wonga, financial stuff, trade union laws, equality laws, poverty, redistribution of wealth, taxes. All of these things are reserved powers. None of them, not to any great extent anyway, none of them are on offer as more powers from any party that might get elected to Westminster. If you're left-leaning, progressive-leaning, you're told the alternative to independence is vote Labour in 2015. On the basis of which Labour government would you trust the promise of another Labour government? The last one led by Gordon Brown, the one before that led by Tony Blair, the one before that was his face. What was his name again? Cunningham? Oh, Callaghan, that's it. Him? So if you base your opposition to independence on the basis of there maybe being, depending on who we vote for, an SNP government, which government, which UK government gives you the belief in the UK? Which one would you pin your vote to justify the continued presence of Scotland in the UK? What one persuades you? And I'll leave you to answer that question yourselves. So Salmond is the first argument, and the government and everything associated within that. Solidarity is the next theme. And again, coming from a left perspective, you don't get the Tories venturing out in Scotland to argue for the UK in a debate. Not yet, I've not seen any. No, I've been at anywhere, but I've been at any of the Tories. Once? Not very often. So the arguments that are presented are coming from a left perspective and pulling the heartstrings of left-wing leaning people to say we're going to abandon the working class people of Newcastle, Liverpool, London, Manchester. You're going to leave them to their fate of Tory governments. As if the 5 million people in Scotland have ever, or rarely, actually influenced the outcome of a Westminster election contrary to how England has voted. Nearly twice. There's always a Labour government returned in London when England votes for a Labour government. And the Labour government that England votes for is a Labour that adjusts itself to the centre ground to appease the middle classes of South East England to enable it to get voted in. So the Labour Party that people vote for in Scotland isn't the Labour Party that people vote for in England generally anyway. So it's futile to think, even if it were democratically okay, it's futile to think that Scotland voting Labour will keep English working class people safe from a Tory government. It doesn't work. And I have to say that people who preach solidarity have got a bit of a cheek when they are advocating the sustenance of a union that has bombed poor and impoverished working class people across the world in illegal wars that we did not support. And solidarity doesn't stop on the coastline of Britain or the United Kingdom islands. Solidarity extends to France, Germany, Canada, America, South America, Africa, Middle East, Afghanistan and Iraq. My solidarity was with the people of Afghanistan and Iraq when the UK state, along with the USA, was bombing them to smithereens. How can anybody justify the continued existence of that state? And on the solidarity question as well, this is a state that banned trade unions at GCHQ. This is a state that brought in anti-solidarity laws, that made solidarity action as trade unionists illegal. Not one single party at Westminster is proposing to unravel those anti-trade union laws. Not one. Not one party is proposing to unravel PFI, the dismantling of the welfare state. Solidarity. With who? I think the biggest message of solidarity we could send to working class people of England, Wales, Northern Ireland and beyond is that we are prepared to stand up and take control of our own destiny as part of a progressive movement that will not let any future government of Scotland off the hook. Because the difference is, we will be able to get rid of that government. Because at present, any government that imposes universal credit, welfare caps, anti-immigration laws, anti-trade union laws, privatisation of public services, it matters not a jot what we say. It matters not a jot who we vote for. With independence, it will matter. My last point, an argument that I'll deal with, is security. Because that's the other one. There's security in the union. I don't know how secure it feels to you. It doesn't feel very secure to me when food banks are multiplying at an incredible rate, when every single major party in Westminster voted for the welfare cap. Only 22 MPs in the whole of the United Kingdom voted against it. Only 2 Labour MPs in Scotland voted against it. So no matter how you vote in September, that's what you'll get. Security is allegedly what we have to look forward to. Independence is a risk to that security. Now all you have is some information and evidence on which you will need to place a reasonable confidence in, a reasonable belief in, and all that you can have are examples. You've got plenty of evidence of how the UK state has operated. You've got plenty of evidence about how poverty has increased, how inequality has increased, how women have suffered the brunt of austerity and cuts. You know what that feels like, and there's more of the same in the pipeline. But there are alternative ways of doing things. And the Nordic countries, I will mention them, because for women particularly, for small nations, the top 10 countries in the world for women, 9 of them have populations of less than 9 million. The top country for women in the world is Iceland, even still, with their crash. And Iceland are recovering at a faster rate than we are. What did Iceland do that was different to what we did? Jailed the bankers, exactly. So with political will and power, you can do things differently. And there's nothing to stop Scotland, with its abundant resources, from doing things differently for women and men and children and future generations, not depleting our natural resources for a quick buck in the meantime, but writing in potentially to our constitution the preservation of our natural resources. All of that is possible with independence. Can you imagine when a UK government will deliver the prospect of equality for women in representation? 22% of MPs in Westminster are women only. Do you see Westminster given the opportunity to write a constitution that builds in equality at its heart? Do you see the prospect of Westminster ever addressing the gap between rich and poor? There are no guarantees, but the difference is we will get the government we vote for. And it will be our responsibility if they're rubbish. We will have the power to get rid of them if they're rubbish. At present, we don't. At present, we have to take it or leave it and lump it. At present, we have to take it or leave it because no matter how Scotland votes, we get the government that the majority of people in England vote for. And that's their democratic right. What we're asking for as independence is not unusual. It's not wrong. It's normal. The democratic right to self-determination, to live in a country where you get the government you vote for, is normal. It shouldn't be a fluke every 20 years or so. It should be a right, a predictable right that you get the government you vote for. So in terms of security, I think the UK state's been very secure for the bankers. I think the UK state's been very secure for landowners who have just had their subsidies doubled for grouse shooting by the UK Tory government. Been very secure for them, but for us, for everybody else, it represents deep, long-lasting insecurity that we have no power to change. With independence, we can. And it's as simple as that.